Are there some serious questions that need to be asked of the commanding officer of the SAS MANTHATISI and the planning around a submarine exercise that left 3 crew members dead yesterday? The South African Navy conducting an exercise off Kommetjie, and submariners who were on top of the submarine swept off the vessel because of high waves. The SA Navy statement saying that high waves swept 7 crew members out to sea, and that a surface swimmer was dispatched from a helicopter to assist with the rescue. Unfortunately, the recovery operation was negatively affected by rough sea conditions. 7 members were recovered, but sadly there were 3 fatalities and 1 senior officer in a critical condition. Dean Wingrin, Defence Analyst, I know we spoke to you yesterday, but you were reporting quite busily on social media yesterday. Firstly, SA Navy saying that a vert trap exercise was underway. What is a vert trap exercise?
Good morning, Lester and the listeners. Thanks for having me on again. And firstly, if I could just extend my condolences to the family of the lost sailors, as well as to the Navy community at large. Yes, a vert trap is a vertical transfer. That is when you have a helicopter hovering above the submarine, and it basically hoists crew and cargo between the helicopter and the submarine, which is what it's something that is regularly practiced between the Air Force and the Navy. And from what we understand, that is what they were practicing yesterday afternoon.
I appreciate that those in the military and those in special forces need to train, need to prepare in all forms of weather conditions and circumstance. But looking at the week-long circumstance of heavy swells around the Cape Coast, do questions need to be asked about the planning of yesterday's exercise?
Yes, the Board of Inquiry will certainly have a look at it. There were swells of over 3 meters yesterday on the Atlantic seaboard, and anybody who was driving the past day or two would certainly see just how rough those conditions are. Now, there is an adage in the Defence Forces that train as you will fight, and then you will fight as you train. But certainly that is something you must take a look at. During peacetime and during training exercises, the limits are a lot stricter than if you were an operational mission. So that is something that would certainly have to be looked at during the review of this exercise.
I think unwarrantedly so, South African Defence Force members often get flack from certain parts of the South African community. As we spoke yesterday, I'm quite familiar in terms of what our armed forces do in the positivity of around the communities, and particularly also in peacekeeping missions. But if you look at the level of training that particularly our submariners have, where would you rate that in the readiness for exercise or combat operations for our South African Navy? Something that is being brought into perspective following yesterday's tragic accident.
Yes, well, regarding your first comment, I think people complain when the Navy is not out to sea, and then they go out to sea and they still complain. So, but the funding of the Defence Force over the last decade has certainly been in serious decline. And that does have a very, very serious impact on the ability of the Navy to go out to sea, to spend time at sea, and obviously for its sailors to get experience at sea. And so they must take every opportunity that they can get. But the budget, the extremely tight budget, is certainly not enough for all the maintenance and upgrades that the Navy needs. So they've had to be very careful and do a lot of shuffling as to what maintenance is done, what can be deferred. South Africa normally has a very good training regime. They've attended courses in the UK, which is regarded as the top tier of any defence force. And so they would have go through very good, tough, adequate training. But obviously, the less sea days you do, the less training you can do, and the less experience the sailors can do. Perhaps if I could just mention, when a submarine is on the surface and the sailors have to go out and go on the deck of the vessel, there are certain safety requirements that must be done. And this includes having a safety line that goes from top of the sail, or what people would call the conning tower, that goes down to the bow of the vessel, the front of the vessel. And anybody who goes out on deck will then clip themselves to the safety line, as well as each member will have their own personal little, not a life raft, but a safety vest that they would deploy should they be swept overboard. And then there would also be a medical officer as part of the crew in the submarine. So these would also be all aspects of the standard operating procedures that were followed. And if not, why not? And if they were followed, why were so many sailors still end up in the sea?
Dean Wingrin, Defence Analyst with Defence Word. Really appreciate your time.